Greetings, friends, and welcome to our 7th installment of a Bible Refresher in 5. What's in it for you? Reed Bear, pastor and teacher at West Parish of Barnstable, United Church of Christ on Old Cape Cod here. Today I want to talk about a teaching tool which Jesus used a lot, parables. Now, when we speak of parables, we immediately run into a problem. What exactly is a parable? Now, one short answer is that a parable is a very short story, usually with characters and situations drawn from common life with a double meaning. Which is kind of right, except that parables often have several meanings, not just a double meaning. Well, another answer is that a parable is a kind of code, which can only be cracked when the listener has attained a certain level of spiritual discernment. Put another way, a parable demands that the listener not take it at face value and not settle for the surface meaning, but wrestle with it. Still another answer is that a parable is a short story which teases the imagination so as to invite the listener into active thought, hoping the listener will actually engage with it. The process is as important as the lesson that is learned. Well, parables are wonderful for group discussion. We can sympathize with different characters. We find different aspects of the parable puzzling. We tend to find different aspects appealing. It's got something for everyone. Now, I've added a list of some of the parables I especially have been drawn to at the end of the video. If you're new to the Bible or coming back to it after time away, you could do worse than just jumping into the parables and having some fun with them. Now, a warning though, if upon your reading you come away with what might be termed the conventional wisdom, you likely have missed where Jesus is going with it. So, let's take a for instance. And to do that, let's look at Luke chapter 15, verses 11 to 32. It's often called the parable of the prodigal son, or the parable of the prodigal and his brother. Prodigal meaning one who is wastefully or recklessly extravagant. Now, before plunging in, let me remind you that the Bible does not, as written, does not have the title headings, which later editors added in to be helpful to readers. So take those headings with a grain of salt. Now, this parable may be familiar to you. A man has 2 sons, and the younger one, dissatisfied with life on the farm, rudely demands that his father fork over the inheritance he would otherwise have to wait until the old man knocks off to get. Well, his father agrees, and the young man takes off to live the high life in a far-off country. He soon runs through the stash and is reduced to taking a job feeding pigs. He then decides to return home and see if he can get hired on by his father, the one he has disrespected and abandoned. When the father sees the son returning, he throws off all decorum and propriety and runs down the road to greet the rascal. He throws his arms around him, gives him fine clothes, gives him his ring, and then throws a feast to welcome him home. Well, the older son, who was working in the fields, comes home to the sounds of a wild party, and only then is told of the return of his brother. He's upset, figuring that while he's been a dutiful son and stayed at home to help out on the farm, he's been taken for granted. Well, the father tries to reason with the resentful older son, telling him that they had to celebrate because his brother, who once was lost, now is found. So what's the point of the parable? Well, certainly one lesson that has been drawn over the centuries is that the parable is about us. That we are the ones who have wandered far from our true home, our home with God, and spent our days just enjoying ourselves. But if we come to our senses and turn towards home and return to God, then we will be forgiven and welcomed back. It's about grace. To quote the beloved hymn, "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see." And yet, and remember that parables can have several meanings. Perhaps the title of the parable should be the parable of the prodigal father. Because maybe the parable is about God, not about us. That it's about how God is like that crazy old coot of a father who throws aside all propriety and goes running off down the road to greet that sinner, and then hugs him close and kisses him and throws a feast in his honor. You think God is just sitting up there on a cloud, just tut-tutting at us and on our foolish ways? You think God is a judge sitting behind a high bench, gavel in hand, just waiting to put the hammer down and condemn us? Think again, my friends. Think again. What's in the Bible for you? Nothing less than new and abundant life. I'll see you next week. And God bless you all, everyone.